Welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. Today I explore the topic of astrology and dreams, but mostly as a student while I talk to the learned Richard Swatton, astrologer and psychotherapist, who has immersed himself in the study of symbolism and how it presents itself through substance. The title of his book, Symbol to Substance, was released a few years back and is a great exploration of that, encouraging you to embody your studies through practice. And today we explore dreams, and this is going to be one of a number of episodes exploring this subject, which is relatable to many because we all have a realm that is activated when we get into a certain brain state and allow our minds or beyond our minds to take over. Some of the interesting areas that we cover are talking about how the transpersonal planets present through dreams. We also talk about the 4 stages of dreams and how they are a type of mythological Greek performance, play, drama. We also discuss a number of interesting people who have played with the ideas of consciousness and done deep studies into it. I'm hoping you find it really interesting. I would love to hear your stories about dreams. I would also love to hear, anything that was, triggered for you or was brought up for you while watching or listening to this episode. And my patrons are being invited to send me information about their dreams so we can discuss them in greater detail in future episodes with Richard. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this exploration of dreams and astrology with Richard Swatton.
Now, the topic of today is dreams, and sometimes I have seen that future things come up in dreams. If astrology is true to life and that it does reflect some process of development, archetypally or energetically or psychologically, or all three. And by archetypally, what I mean is to say there are energetic patterns in the world that are slowly evolving and developing. Archetypal experiences are those ones we all experience together: life, birth, death, worry, crisis, war. These are all archetypal experiences. War is in a conflict. So if it does reflect that, then it's going to come up in dreams from time to time. But I wanted to say something, and if you're working with your astrology and you're working with your dreams, I went through a very intense period of working with transits very deeply. And what happened is my dreams started to become involved. It's as if it wanted into the conversation. So, for example, I did immerse myself in a 3-year Neptune Chiron transit. I immersed myself in it. I read everything I could about Chiron. I read everything I could about Neptune. I reread Liz Green's. I went into its natal position. I found out a lot about the 6th house because it's in my 6th house, and so on. It's opposed Pluto, and that takes a long while. It's like an intense research. And after a while, it started to turn the actual work that I was doing active imagination work with it and trying to think about transits and what I'd been doing that day just before sleep and taking them into sleep. And then before long, my dreams started to communicate back.
Wow.
And then outside situations started to symbolize, because I was carrying it around so much, I was walking into scenarios which were of that transit. So symbol, internal life, activity, energy patterns, and events all started to coordinate, all started to blend together. So I do believe that even though we're talking about dreams today, that the more intently you work on something consciously, especially with symbols, which our dreams are essentially to do with images and symbols, metaphors and the rest, that you can start to the unconscious, or whatever the unconscious is, an intelligence beyond us in some way, somehow in the brain, but also connected to the world, I think. It has something to say. So direct astrology work can, I wouldn't say influence, but call upon further or deeper activities of the unconscious mind. And dreams are obviously the activity of the subterranean mind, shorn of its conscious control, because we have to get on with things during the day. But when that's gone, and you're in a kind of trance in a way, unconsciously, then the brain activity at night can be seen in its full flourishing in dreams. We don't see anything in dreamless sleep, which is doubter states, but of brainwave activity. So I just want to say that it's not so far divorced from our subject today.
No.
So astrologers seeing this might want to start to immerse themselves. Now, I wrote an article, Frank asked me to write an article for Mountain Astrologer on transit, and he's published it several places. I think it's on his website too. And the last section was about, you don't get very much time to talk about things in articles, but the last section was something called deep immersion. And that's where, and I would do those without a planet transits because they're going to last a long time. Your Pluto Mercury will be coming up in 2024. We'll be touching upon it 2025 and 2020.
I think it stations actually on my Mercury at 2 degrees for anybody who's curious.
Right.
To Aquarius. Yeah. So I'm going to have but I'm not worried about it because I've had Pluto transits my whole life. Like Pluto is it's either the trailing. I think Mars is my leading and Pluto is my trailing, or it's the other way round.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pluto is literally, it's hit every planet in my chart so far, and it will continue to do so by conjunction for as if I live as long as it can to reach my Mars, basically. So I've had it over my sun and my moon and everything, so I'm not nervous about it.
No.
It's just that you can't help but notice its presence in your life. Like, just for example, I've started getting into minimalism. I just don't see the point in stuff anymore, and I'm getting really, really agitated by being surrounded by things.
Yes.
And I just want to declutter everything. It's a constant work in progress. It's always on my mind. So I'm going through this massive decluttering thing. And I'm also like really zoning in on areas of interest that I'm like getting quite obsessed with. And obviously, to bring it back to dreams, I've noticed lately that my dreams are extremely vivid, and some of them are they can be a little bit dark. Like one of them was just, for example, the other night I should say, I was walking through a tunnel somewhere, going from one part of my astral landscape to the other. And for anybody who's curious what I mean by that, I actually did some dream journaling years ago, and for quite a long time, and I started to map out in my waking state areas in my mind while I was in my sleep state.
Yes.
So it became a real map in reality.
Yes.
And I've got new places I've never been to, and some of them are old places that I've been before. And it's like I've moved areas and I'm in a different place in my life, and actually in my astral state I'm in a different place too, in some places, in some of my dream states. But anyway, so I was going from one new place to another, and I think I was with my partner in one place, and I was trying to go to this new place. And as I was walking through this tunnel, and there's not much I can remember other than this, as I was looking down the tunnel, I could see a shadow walking towards me, being cast on the ground, but there was no figure casting the shadow. And it walked straight past me, and it gave me the coldest goosebumps ever. And I apparently had night terrors that night, I was told. So it was very frightening. And I just woke up and I was like, I don't actually know what that was about. And it did scare me. And getting up to pop to the loo or something like that, just lately I have had this kind of feeling of like I am not alone right now. It's like the veil is thin. It just feels thin to me. And I feel like I'm getting visitations, to put it one way or another, just maybe relatives that have recently passed, or somebody I don't even know, but there just feels like there's somebody or something around, and it's connected to my dream state too, it feels.
There's a lot there, because
Oh, a lot to
no,
unpack.
because I think it's important to sometimes differentiate between the different types of dreams. So, for example, astral dreaming or astral projection is a different kind of experience, and that's where you can, I mean, it's you can project into landscapes, you can map them out, and that it is in the imaginary, or it is in dreamland, but it's not dreams per se. There's something very, it's like a different world. And Kabbalists, let's say, work on the tree of life diagram, or ritual magicians set up certain temples, at the different stations of life. So there's the moon temple, and the Mars temple, and Jupiter temple, and excuse me, and those are to do with affecting your astral experiences. So instead of just wandering off into fantasy, or wandering off into your subconscious complexes, or whatever that is, or if you're taken to another side or another territory called a liminal state between waking and dreaming, you see, waking and proper dreaming, or psychological dreaming, then you can learn to control where you go or what you do. Right now, that's astral. And so that's the whole point about symbol systems, by the way, or ritual working, or path working, or working even with tarot. Or Edward Steinbrecher wrote that book years ago about I can't remember what it's over there somewhere, but it's a whole landscape that you can project into.
I mean, one of the reasons why I was
using your
journaling was
astrological
to
chart to venture around your own inner landscape.
Really? So actually using your own chart to do that?
Yeah. I'll get it later and I'll show you. I don't know why I can't recall it to mind. It's quite famous. Frank knew Edward Steinbrecher. Anyway, following that kind of years, it's a way of going into. He uses the cave, and you go into a cave, and then you find a route out. You turn left, and you find a kind of door, and then you go through that door. And then when you go through that door, you come into an astrological landscape in which you meet various aspects. You see, so anyway, there's a whole system of active imagination, pathworking stuff. But where it becomes real is that you project into it, and it's very, very real, and you can feel yourself disembodied, floating around, and it has a different feeling of dreaming. Okay, so that's astral. Lucid dreaming is different. Lucid dreaming is what the great Tibetan lamas do. I do it from time to time, but I find that my ability to do it wavers. I think it's got something to do with the moon, actually. If it's in the last quarter, it's not, the first quarter, and we can talk all about this and using dream states, but this is what I'm just on at the moment.
Interesting.
Is that the lucid dream is where you learn to wake up when you are asleep. Now, some people, I've got a couple of clients that do this naturally. They go, oh, I want to go back into that dream. So they kind of go sleep, and then they pick it up where they left off after going to the loo.
Yes. And that's part of the dream journaling, was developing my ability to do kind of astral projection, because I had done that previously as a child and stuff, not intentionally, but also with the lucid dreaming, it's like being able to just dip back in, like you press play on the series you've paused and go in and continue it. But
there's a because I've had several of those, and some have been induced. I've had quite a lot of astral experiences, and I can tell you there's a subjective difference. It's like my first lucid dream. I got up from bed, and I went into the kitchen to make my normal tea, which is a kind of classic ritual. But I had absolutely believed I was absolutely me. In other words, I got up from bed, I'd gone into the kitchen, and I was making my tea. And for all intents and purposes for me, that is what I was doing. I was not aware that I was in my dream, that I was asleep. Now there's a different, you see what I mean? There's a qualitative difference between that and astral kind of floating around and landscapes and things. And the only reason, this was in 46 Nelson's Row, which is where I used to live in London. The only reason I learned that was that I was making my tea and my analyst walked in. Now, I had the Jungian analysis for 14 years, and she's walking in the kitchen. Like, well, I'm talking to you now. It's as real as this.
Yes.
And I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? What? And I woke up in the dream and I said, oh my God, this must be a lucid dream.
Wow.
And she kind of, and it's like, what I learned from that is there's a level in the dream state. There are different levels of dream reality. The normal ones we'll probably get onto today are about the psychological complexes and inner dreaming and deep dreaming and mantic dreams, which is precognitive dreams. We'd like to talk all about that today. But there's that lucid dreaming is a most peculiar thing. And you know, the general rule is you can't turn on and off a light switch. That's how you know.
Right. Okay.
And the other one is that when you're in a lucid dream, if you want to know, you look at your hands.
Yes, that's the one I've always heard of.
Right. So and then something happened, you can see a kind of luminosity there, and then you know you're in the dream. Now the trick is not to wake up. Now when I saw Catherine Bygott, which was my analyst at the time, I then had a state, and I couldn't quite believe it, and then I woke up in a dream in my bed, and then I woke up.
Wow.
Do you see what I mean? So I knew from that experience that I was in a deep, you couldn't call it an unconscious state. It was like I was very conscious, but I didn't know outer reality from inner reality. It was the same.
That's mad.
It's mad. But when I woke up and I made notes and everything else about it, I realized there are levels. Like a lift, you know, you go in a lift and there's floor 5. You get out floor 5 and you think you're on the ground floor because it's an exact simulacrum of real life. But if you can wake up in that state, as some people have learned to do in prisons, for example, and they have, let's say, bizarre or unusual sexual fantasies that are not possible to carry out in real life, it could be used quite therapeutically, that they could then find a lover on the inner planes, if you like, or they wanted to be something or do something, and you could program these lucid dreams for a kind of psychological satisfaction, you see. So they have clinical applications, but that's lucid dreaming. Now etheric is totally different. Again, etheric is a projection out of your body, but it's in a different plane of reality. You're kind of asleep, but you can see your body and you can walk around in an energetic body. Then there's dreams of a personal kind, which we normally know. They're telling you something about yourself, or they're inner scenarios or dramas, which analysts, psychoanalysts and things make use of. Even astrologers make use of them because they can foretell future transits. You're experiencing Pluto, Mercury right now with all that. Talking to the dead, talking to those Pluto as a base is to do with the collective unconscious, because the collective unconscious is that is the whole of mankind that's dead. You see, so it's completely full of shells. It's a desert, because the desert is a load of shells, and you know, of the dead, of dead creatures and everything else. And so that plane of reality is 3 billion years old, and Pluto comes around in a chart. You're going to contact that reality, your little individual speck of time, you know, 70, 80, 95 years on the course of thousands and thousands or millions of years. It's such an exciting subject.
It is an exciting subject, and you've just made me think about when I was journaling, and it was around the time I had Neptune transit my Mars, and my Mars is trine my natal Pluto anyway, and then it went on to it definitely went on to exactly trine my Pluto at some point. So it was like the opening up of something that was so it was such an experience. In my life, that whole period was an awakening, not like a Uranian awakening. It was a much more deep, and I was really found myself immersed in sort of esotericism, really, but through a relationship that I was in, and the person who identified my interest and ability, and through our conversation and reading and what we chose to watch, we were able to really immerse ourselves. I can't remember if you met my partner before, who I was with before, but he was it was the guy that was the musician in the music studio, and
I heard about him.
Yes, and he was very much, and probably still is, into all of this stuff, and it was such an enriching time in my life. But yes, I was journaling and doing all that, and that was Neptune trine my Pluto, but also over my Mars. So it really opened me up to dream state and dream journaling, and getting into the Akashic records, and this kind of collective unconscious.
Yes, they're all the collective unconscious, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, but they have different experiences of them. And one is life beyond death, that's Pluto, and transformation. But Neptune, did you see my course, Worlds Beyond Ego? Did you see that?
Yes. Oh, that was brilliant. Yes. Okay. Brilliant.
So you remember that what I was calling the ultimate interpretation at a kind of spiritual level of the outer three planets. And with Neptune, I linked it to transubstantiation, which essentially means that in a Neptune transit, you realize your substance is part of everybody else's substance. It's a condensation into an individual. Incarnation is and so the separate self sense is Saturn. Very important that we take care of that. Death, taxes, have walls, structure, routine, self-discipline, all necessary, all wonderful values of Saturn. But the Neptune experience is realize that all of our substance is made out of the earth and elements and everything else, and you're part of it. So this word immersion that you've just used is, immersion in the bath, immersion into something like a kind of shared hallucination that you get when you take LSD with people or mushrooms or something. The walls of division start to get a little like an octopus, they fade. Now Uranus is a slightly different thing. You kind of have revelations of your realization that your mind is connected, and I related that to the transfiguration of Christ, but where it's ultimate gnosis. But Neptune is that immersive, my substance is yours. I used to see two twins, and I remember they were born exactly the same time, Moon in Pisces in the 12th, and they lived apart, but they would have simultaneous dreams together, no matter how, and they have the same dream at the same time, the same night.
Yeah, that's
right,
incredible.
no matter where they were in the world. And again, these little facts, these are all facts, go to re-establish in your mind the reality of these inner planes, the dimension of imagination, the etheric or astral dimensions of life, or whatever way that you want to do it. The mind and the soul are in touch with plenty else beside terra firma. Dream reality is a way of accessing that, or a way of it moving through you so that your individuality expresses movements of a larger direction, which is collective dreams, which is the mediumistic quality.
Yes. I was just going to say that as I've had relationships or friendships where we've been so connected and discussed our dreams and realized we dreamt of the same thing, you know, with my previous partner and my partner that I'm with now, I've experienced similar things. You know, we'd talk about our dreams, and with my previous partner, we would have dreams that we actually met in our dream, and then we wake up and go, "You were in my dream last night," and you know, we'd be like, "Yeah, but same way the other way around." And you know, with Chris now, we will discuss things and we'll both go, "I just dreamt about that." You know, it's not that we're meeting up, but we're dreaming of the same stuff. And it's almost like they say with women, when they spend time together, they synchronize, like their cycles synchronize. It's almost like there's a kind of spiritual cycle that you can synchronize when you spend a lot of time with somebody, whether or not you're totally in sync with your you know, daily reality beliefs and what you think about the real world. When you're in this other state, it's almost like a synchronization. I don't know. And you know, my partner is a twin as well, and I think he probably has similar things to what you've just described as well.
But I suppose the Neptune side of that, as I say, is sinking in on the substance. That you're participating in the same substance, which is beyond temporal, the time space dimension. It's an eternal substance. I mean, you know, the Renaissance people used to call it the anima mundi, and figured her actually as the soul of the world. That means so there's a substance called the eternal flux, or the etheric web of the earth, or whatever fantasic fictions we call this. I believe it's true that there is an anima mundi, and sometimes people dream for other people, or dream because they're precognitive. These are called mantic dreams. And I know from my work as a psychotherapist, depending on the depth of the work that we're going to, sometimes the dream that my client dreams is for me, because they need to correct something that I've incorrectly interpreted or made a wrong move. I might have a dream which corrects something, but sometimes they are telling me, their dream is telling me. I remember one, it told me I'm coming on too strong, basically. And I appeared in their dream as a kind of medallion man, and was 40. You know how it was in the 60s. So I was coming on a kind of macho, middle-aged. So, and it wasn't for her; it was for me. And
that's interesting.
So that's how I was. And I don't want to appear like that.
No.
So
no, I know I've had a.
You see what I mean, though, that dreams cross boundaries.
Yes, and I know I came to you and had some sessions with you, sort of astrology psychotherapy, and you asked me if I could have a dream for you to bring it to the next session. And I think I had a couple. I think the first one was just a kind of an opening up to being. I seem to remember I was sitting in an armchair in your house, or you were in mine, I can't remember, and we were eating noodles or something. You were like, I think we're ready to, And then the next dream was in my grandmother's back garden.
Yes, I
remember. And it's like, I won't go into all the details, but it was interesting that came up, because it's always been a repetitive theme in my dreams. And my grandmother has since passed away, and I haven't really been able to go back to the house. Like, I was given loads of opportunities to visit, and I just couldn't. I didn't want to, and I couldn't. My mum kept saying, but it's just a house, it doesn't matter, you know. And I just couldn't understand why. And then recently I found the date that she bought the house, that the deeds were signed and everything was handed over, and I cast the chart for it, and Pluto was at 29 degrees of Cancer, and obviously transiting Pluto is opposite that, and my natal Pluto is square that in Libra. And I just suddenly had this huge it instigated a release for me, and I understood the importance of that property, without having to put any words, because obviously, like you've said before, like the symbol is so powerful, like you can't sum it up in a sentence. But then I started dreaming about her house again. I just thought, isn't it funny? Like, you know, that this is so entangled with, you know, dream state and astrological symbolism. I mean, there's one thing to be said about having a dream. It's like, you know, where does it come from? What's it about? It's very interesting. But to think that I felt that connection to the house, that I could not explain why I couldn't go there. It felt so painful to get rid of that house. It's been in the family for a long time. And to see that chart for the very first time and see other things, of course, their astrological stuff, but you know, the positioning of Pluto to me just blew my mind. I just couldn't believe it. You know, it's just very interesting.
We're back to what Pluto means, which is death and resurrection, essentially, or a death and a rebirth, and that certain things are eternal, whether they're in form or whether they're out of form. And you know, we don't like to get, I've just got rid of my car this year. I've had it for a number of years, and it's like the memory of it is a whole trail of time. And you think that if you get rid of the form, then you're getting rid of something else. You see, so you know, if you're outside there in the garden of your back, the garden of your grandmother, there's something in you which needs to know the background, the terra firma. Where have you come from? Where have you going? And the grandmother represents the mother of the mother, or the mother of the father in the ancestral history. So Pluto links you into a much greater cycle of development than just your personal self. It's a 250-year cycle, or sometimes 252. And so wherever we are on it in our Pluto position means we're picking up on somebody else's. So it's Pluto, and Pluto transits and Pluto positions are always ancestral, collective unconscious, especially if they're linked to the 12th or the 4th or the 8th by you know, rulers, or in there, or in Pisces or Cancer or Scorpio. They link to the feeling states echoing over from the past. You know,
I think
that's in the building.
T-square, that it apexes, because obviously my Pluto is the apex point of that whole T-square with the transiting Pluto, the original positioning at the house sale, and so it's in the water houses as well. So I think from 2nd to 8th, and apexing just on the cusp of the 5th, actually. So, but really interesting. And my sister's also got same Pluto as me, and one of my cousins does as well. And we all have found it incredibly difficult. But my sister felt compelled to start painting houses. So for her, it was like the beginning of like getting into expressing herself artistically, which I thought was interesting, that it was specifically about painting properties that meant something to people. Funny, isn't it?
Property, houses, places are very common images in dreams. I don't think you can ever, you know, there's lots of dream books about that. This image means this and this. It's a good place to start. I mean, I've got a lot on symbols in there, Dictionary of Symbols, Sherlock's Dictionary of Symbols, and, you know, lots of things. And they're a good place to start imagining.
I don't know who this is, but instead of having a book of dreams, it's like a encyclopedia.
Yes, I think I have
symbolism, because it's something that is a bit more, rather than just a dream dictionary. And there's so many online as well that you look up the meaning online, and I don't know where half of them get the idea of what they mean in these things, but I take those ones with a pinch of salt usually.
Well, they stem from different ways of interpreting dreams, you see. Again, one is a scientific method, one is more artistic. And you know, to work with dream images in therapy, you have to work on their personal associations. What do you personally, you know, is that your table, or is that an old table from your grandmother's house? Oh, all right. So it's not just a table, but there is archetypal associations to table. It could be Christ's table. It could be a place where you meet, meals generally. So when you're starting associating with individual images, you can go off in several directions. And typical of the dream world, actually, you can get lost and not cohere any meaning. So it's best to stick with your personal associations first. But the general association of a house, yes, it might be a particular house, or it might be whatever, but it might be just a house, is that the house is where you reside, or it's where you're in. And it usually represents the psyche, the box that you live in normally. And of course, Jung had his great revelation going into a house where he went down into the cellar, and he was in his great communication and dialogue with Freud. You know, when they first got together, they didn't stop talking for about 20 hours. It's like that when there's a syzygy between people, because
I feel like that's like me and you.
yes, that's right. But there's a syzygy, and he had a dream after their collaboration for quite some time. He had a dream where he was in a house, and he was searching the rooms and everything else, like they were discussing rooms in your head, right? There's your, there's your Mercury room and your front room, and there's the kitchen. The kitchen's always so important in dreams too. That's an interesting image, the kitchen. How many dreams have I seen where people walk through the kitchen, or they meet in the kitchen? Sometimes it's a substitute lounge, isn't it? Anyway, so he went down into the cellar, but then he was going to come back out, and then he saw another trapdoor, and he opened that trapdoor, and there was a long kind of ladder all the way down, and he went into that. It was a kind of tunnel all the way down, and then right at the bottom he found two skulls. And he woke up from that dream realizing that he had, in his work with Freud, he discovered the personal unconscious. In other words, all the repressed memories from your childhood, all the things you want to do, things that you're not seeing about yourself, which are in the dark, which are hidden, which are somewhere in the back of your mind. And that's the world of Freud, because Freud believed the unconscious really, in the early days, was a dumping ground of stuff you didn't want to look at. So, repressed material. That's unfair on Freud, because Freud was a pioneering man who then changed his theories, and he included what is called archaic vestiges. So I'm just praising it. But Jung realized that there was a layer underneath our own individual life called the collective layer, the collective unconscious, and that we are part of the ever ongoing time. And to place us in the context of ongoing time takes us out of our personal problems, and it places them into something that we have to do. These are our problems, and they've come from our family or from our nation or something, and we are part of a eternal time, continuing on the development. So Jung was about trying to place our particular problems within the context of a universal development. And Freud wouldn't have it. Freud interpreted the two skulls as a murderous complex, and that in the end they were going to both end up dead, which or a father complex, right? Because he was interested in.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, they're both right, because it was after that dream that Jung's relationship with Freud started to fade and then die, had to be severed. So in effect, he did kill his father. And in effect, he was going his own way. He was destroying following a father figure in Freud. He had to die. And then he discovered the collective unconscious. So they can both be right.
Yeah. It's interesting to look at it like that.
But the layers of the house, just to come back to that image, often reflect the layers, which started to talk about layers of dreaming, the layers of reality that we participate in. Waking reality is simply, well, it's interesting, isn't it? But
extremely. I'll tell you what you got me thinking about when you were talking about Jung's dream. Was I heard of this from a friend. A friend told me this, or maybe I read it in an article. I think I read the article. There was a woman who'd just kept having these recurring dreams about these people being trapped, and the dream was just very grey, and they're sort of like trapped behind railings, and she kept on seeing this, and it was like a dream she'd feel extremely like stressed out, but like anxious and restless, and she kept having this dream, and it kept happening again and again and again. And in the end, she just thought, I need to go to the doctors and talk to the doctor, because I feel like there's something I'm just aware of something here, and it's screaming at me. And it got more and more stressful and more vivid, even though it was like a very dull kind of dream. And in the end, she went to the doctors and insisted that she have a scan, like a body scan or something. And I think she asked them to like focus on, you know, the bowels area, and it turned out she had bowel cancer. Right. And it's like she knew somehow that her body, not in its conscious state, was aware, but in the dream state was saying something to her. It just made me think of that, you know, it's like coming from the depths and communicating with us.
Well, can I say a large proportion of dream analysis, from one of the first people to lay down theories of dreams was Artemidorus, and he called it, I think it's about 3rd century or maybe 3rd century BC. He called his work the interpretation of dreams, and Freud called his work the interpretation of dreams. So he must have known about Artemidorus, but also Hipparchus, Hippocrates, and Galen, who was a kind of anatomist of the 10th century. They all believed that dreams could help you diagnose things. And talking about Mercury, called a psychopomp, Mercury is the planet of communication. So the body can't, it speaks its own language, but there is a filter mechanism somehow where you go from the mythic material, from the body, then you go up and up and up, and eventually it becomes a word or an image. So there is a communication system going on between levels of reality: thinking, feeling, body, maybe astral and spiritual as well, but communications from your spirit or your soul. So, and they have a way of filtering and communicating through the language of dream. Now, you can never know from the beginning where it's from unless you're deeply intuitive. Is it coming from your personal unconscious? Is it coming from your body? But there's no doubt in mine, I've in my practice over 30 years now, that some dream images are about the body, and that's absolutely case in point.
Yeah,
I know I have, when I'm ill, sometimes the dream will tell me how long I'm going to be ill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And in the doctrine of the astrological doctrine of begins with D, the decumbrature chart. The decumbrature chart is produced when you it used to be you took a sample of your urine to the doctor, right? And that was a moment when you'd handed over your substance to the doctor, and he was going to look at that in order to diagnose what was wrong with you. They still do it today. Doctors, they look at the color of the urine. If there are anything's in it, they can diagnose disease from that. And or you can, when you go in the morning, what kind of day you're going to have. Is it murky? Is it bright? Is it, you know, is it sullen? Is it, you know, anyway, let's not get into them. but there's an interesting thing about that if you do a chart of that, it's a lot to do with the moon's movements, and usually after the beginning of a disease, or an illness, you can see the progression of it through the moon's arch. And if you for example, if you start at a new moon, that it might take a month, because it's got to go around all the way. But if you're halfway, you see, or just left a conjunction of Mars and you've got a fever, then it might need to move to a sextile of the sun or something like that to bring it out. So there's a whole method in that about movement and you know, astrology is very much to do with your imagination and the projection on the stars and everything else, but you use it, it's very real. So there's no doubt in my mind that the body, if it can, and sometimes it will produce dream images to tell you that there's something wrong with it, because it's and that's Mercury.
I mean, like, on the lightest level, I've had dreams where I've had, like, I remember once, it sounds gross, but like I had flies in the back of my throat and I woke up with a sore throat, and like that's a really obvious, almost like you're kind of half awake and you are aware of something not right, but then it must be that the deep body can communicate that, like there's some connection. Maybe some people, that I don't know whether it shows a sign of being more conscious or less, because, you know, like, to either A, sort of wake up and remember the dream, or B, put like the pieces together and kind of say, well, you know, this dream is coming from within, and it kind of symbolized something very deep that's, you know, going on, you know, in the very core. It's, you know, it's hard to say whether or not it's something that is something that you could dismiss very easily, like, you know, who's the conscious person here, who's the conscious party actually in that relationship.
Well, Jung has a lot to say about that. And so does what you might call esoteric psychology, that in order to function as an individual in a culture, you have to learn the language, you have to learn the moral codes. Well, you don't have to, but you should do. You have to go through certain education, and this is an education of what is called the ego, or the conscious ego. It's rationality, it's all of that. It functions to adapt you to waking reality. Now, when you get to a certain point, you think that's consciousness, but you sit on a whole bodily vehicle, which is the product, as I say, of about 26,000 years of growth since the cerebral hemispheres. You've got all that cultural history. You've got all of the influence of your parents and their parents and their parents. And through your genetics and through their actual being, you've got that all soaring in your system. You've got to take care of business. You've got to make a cup of tea. You've got to look after your child. You've got to earn a living, right? But that's not only life. That's conscious life. In dreams, all that's taken away. So we've got to deal with the body. So in a way, consciousness gets divided into internal and external. So, but actually that's a false dichotomy. That's just, we are aware of the soul of the world all the time, but we're tuning it out. You know, like that old chestnut metaphor of the radio, that, you know, there's the radio waves, and if you tune into them, you could tune into a different dimension of consciousness. And the way of doing that with astrology and dreaming, you can access them. So is there another side just beyond this, to do with consciousnesses that haven't moved on? Who knows? That's the kind of mediumistic idea.
Yes, and it makes me think of people that, you know, they dream of their loved ones that have passed, and they're almost with them, or they can't quite catch up with them. You know, it's
I've had that. Absolutely. When was it? Wasn't it maybe 9 years after my mother died? Still something hanging over from it. No matter how much you do, there's, as I say, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. That's an old joke. Old psychoanalytic joke. She came back to me in a dream, she was sitting across from me. This was in the 2018, 16, something like that. She was sitting across from me having a cup of tea. Totally unexpected dream from nowhere. I hadn't been thinking about her or anything else.
Yeah.
And she just said one thing. She said, "I'm sorry." That was it.
Wow.
That's all I needed. That was all I needed. And it was, I'm sorry. And there's no need to go into personal details, but there was a whole thing. But everybody has a mother complex. It's not unusual. But that was her final parting, and that was like 9 years after her death, something like
Wow.
that. So they're there, and I happen to believe that when a person passes on, often they come into your mind, and I think it's absolutely right that you sit and talk to them, because the mind, I mean, Jung would never ever discuss any of the dreams that he and Freud discussed together. He would never betray it, because he says these kind of things, honesty, integrity, they're beyond. They have a way of influencing the future if you don't have integrity. So he would never speak of that. So I think there is a plane of reality in which these things are not time. It's not a matter of time.
Yes.
I mean, I've had dreams of Jung in it. I've had, once, and this was many years ago, and it was a final, no, not a final, it was almost an initiation, where all the reading that I'd done and all the Jungian analysis that I'd done and all the dream work that I've got thousands of my dreams in there that I've worked on, thousands. And I went into a shop of his, and he didn't say anything to me, but he did something for me, and he was saying, yes, you get it, but now you've got to digest it all. He made me a meal, basically. He made me a meal, and that was his. And he was very, very old at the time in the dream. So I think these figures are alive energetically and so on. So I don't want to make any theories about that, but I've had dreams with Orson Welles and lots of people, as well as waking people. So who was one of my heroes. I think the mind is in touch with all these things and can communicate you. So whether that was my mother, it was my mother. And she, in her waking life, it wasn't a memory, but in her waking life, she never apologized.
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like there was, whether it's something that you've created in order to calm yourself and give yourself that closure that you needed, which is something we can never really truly know, or whether it was, it was actually connecting with another kind of dimension, right, where actually this is a conversation that you both needed to have in order to both move on even.
And you're so right, because our mind is limited. And was this a part of my healing mind that conjured up this image of my mother, put me in the thing, having a cup of tea, and she said that to me? Was that what I needed? Yes, absolutely. But here's the nub. Who invented that? What intelligence decided to use my brain to conjure up that image for something that I needed so many years later?
Yes.
Who did that? Now, that brings us to the very important question: who is the maker? Who is the originator of the dream? Because it's certainly not me, as I know it. You mentioned me. See? It's not all me. There's objective processes, just like there's objective processes in science going on that we can't see. These processes are going on objectively. There are rules of psychodynamics. There are rules of energetic dynamics, and there's an intelligence, because something ordered that. It ordered that up for me, almost like a prescription. And there's also an order to dreams, generally, that you can see that they have a dramatic structure, as Jung looked at them, and he wrote a whole lot about that structure, how they represent very often a Greek drama. And he called it, it starts off with the exposition, then a dream moves into the peripetia, which I should explain in a minute. Then there's a crisis, and then there's a lysis. Those are the 4 dimensions of dream reality or dream drama. The exposition is the setting. You're in a house, you're in a car, you're in a country lane. The peripetia actually means walking around. So You start to do something, you go downstairs from then upstairs, you start to move. Then you meet a crisis, something happens, right? Which is called the development of the dream. Your mother walks in. Your father walks in. Somebody smashes a hole through the wall. That's the crisis. And then in the last bit of the dream is called the lysis, or the resolution. And sometimes you don't get that because you wake up because you're so frightened by the crisis that you see, and the dream is almost saying, now it's up to you to find a resolution, you see. So the dream, it knows that you're going to come out of the dream and into waking life. And sometimes the last bit of the dream, the feeling that you had, frightening or fit, whatever it is what you need to work on. Because that's the bit that you're going to most memorize when you come into waking reality. Yes. So,
I mean, as you talked about that, I was back in that tunnel walking through with that shadow coming towards me, and I was thinking, oh, this is, I'm imagining it every stage as you're telling me. Yeah.
Yes. So Jung studied this very strongly about the general structure of dreams. Now, if dreams are structured in a dramatic form, then they have a mythic element to them, because myth is drama. It's a story. Who creates the story?
Yeah.
I don't create the story. That story is archetypal. That's the story of drama. That's an archetypal structure that we see in films, in poetry, and in our lives. Do you see what I mean? So anyway, I don't want to necessarily get into the technicalities of dream analysis.
No.
We can do if you like, because Freud's ideas about dreams are absolutely marvelous.
I feel like that would make a really great episode in the future. But one of the things that got me thinking when you were talking about who is the maker is the sort of the theory of quantum physics, and how we are almost, to kind of really overly simplify the subject, what we expect to see in the particle test is, what we will find.
I don't know anything about that.
Oh gosh, it's so like, here's going to test my ability to explain a complex subject, but just simple terms. There was an experiment that was carried out where I think they called it the double slit experiment, and they created two little holes that they were firing.
Oh yes, I know that. That's the classic between is matter a wave or is it a particle? And it can be both.
Yes, and what they say, well, I don't know whether this is what the scientists are saying or the metaphysical community are saying, is ultimately what we expect to see is what will be the result on the other side when we look. If we think we're going to see a wave, we will see a wave, and if we think we're going to see a particle, we're going to see a particle. So actually, when it comes to waking reality, who is the observer that's imagining this realm? It just reminded me, what you were saying reminded me of that, and it brings you back to who was the maker, because who is the ultimate observer here? Because ultimately us here, we have our own experiences, but there's somebody we are the experience of, that science would suggest.
Yeah. Well, here we're entering dodgy territory.
I know.
No. When I say dodgy, I don't mean wrong or criminal. I mean, it's a territory that is the exploration of consciousness territory, of spiritual life, and man is the only mankind, womankind, all right, let's not get too bogged down in that. Man is a collective. Is the only being that can think about themselves thinking. Now, this is a really strange thing. It's interesting. Cognitive therapy doesn't quite get this, but if they thought about it, it might drive them a bit bonkers. You can think in a certain way. You have paradigms of thinking. You have unconscious thinking habits, usually negative, critical, problematic. And one way or another, whichever therapy, it has to be cognitive in the end, that you think differently or you feel differently. See, so how you feel might influence your thinking patterns to think in a particular way. And the very words we're coming back to your Pluto Mercury, actually, and the meaning of it. The very words and vocabulary that you use, your understanding of life is going to change dramatically to something of more depth. So it would destroy your Geminian peripheries. Would you like to talk about this subject or that subject or so-and-so, you see? But Gemini connects, that's its function, fine, but Pluto deepens. It connects all of those threads to a deeper core. Hauser Sportus, the late great Hauser Sportus, used to call Pluto the core self, or the self of necessity, the cosmic will that binds our own individual will into a greater purpose, right? So that's a theme that we talked about earlier on. So in the end, you can think about yourself thinking. And if you go further and further back, you realize you're just observation. You are consciousness. That's what there is a consciousness of which you are aware, but it gets divided. I'm conscious of the table, I'm conscious of you, I'm conscious of my thoughts, conscious of my feelings, conscious of my actions. But there is an exercise in non-dual work where you just go through all that and you're just consciousness. And when you realize that, Jung called it the self, or you could call it God, or non-dual reality, or the ground of consciousness. There's the supreme identity. Oh my God, there's thousands of different epithets and descriptions of that reality. The great one that I've always liked, that whenever I was into him for some time, not now so much, was Krishna Murti. And Krishna Murti never said I. He always said the observer says in his works, and I used to think it was a bit weird. Sun opposed Uranus, Sun in the third opposed Uranus. So in his communications, the observer has this to say. So he was always objectifying who the hell was talking. Do you see? He was trying to get beyond the personal I, the sun, and represent it as part of an ongoing dialogue. Of consciousness. I hope that's not too wacky, but
no, not at all.
Marie-Louise von Franz, one of the greatest dream interpretators who ever lived, they made a film of her called The Way of the Dream, 9.5 hours of her dream interpreting. 9.5 hours, you think, God, that's boring. The woman is alive. She's a living force of brilliance, in my opinion. I've seen that. I've seen it a lot of times. She's just wonderful. And she was once asked that, who's the maker of dreams? She said nature. Nature, she couldn't go any further. It's like, it's a natural phenomenon that's happening in you. You don't have to have a cause. It just is. But nevertheless, when you examine the details of that cause, it comes out as structure, it comes out as myth, it comes out as image, and it comes out as a drama. So there are archetypal levels of structure or understanding that the human mind can grasp, which is structure, language, image, thinking. But that's not to say that the cause is that. That's just the structured layers through which we comprehend things.
It's almost like the Virgo process of the human trying to understand the realm that is totally intangible.
Yes. Virgo is the most, well, it's an underrated sign. You know, they say it's too coy and shy and utilitarian, and you say that to a Virgo and they think, how boring. But actually it is the sign of integrating the structured layers of the first 6 signs. So it has a process of interfacing between the world of physicality, because and the outside world. So it has to order that. Otherwise, all the sensate experiences you have are not coordinated into anything. You're just a mess. You're a blob.
Yes. We'd be the opposite sign of Pisces.
You'd be the Pisces, exactly. But this is an interesting dynamic of the deep processes shown by the signs, that Virgo is the interaction between the outside and the inside. and it tries to order all the sensate functions and senses and experience, and it orders them, and therefore makes sense. And so you're an integrated whole. That is a gate. I'm going through there, so and so. There's that kind of coordinated process, because if it didn't, it would be chaos. You'd be the Pisces sign. It's Pisces' duty to unpick all that order and reconnect you with a greater flow of life. They have their difficulties. Virgo has its difficulties. Yes. Sorry, I hope that wasn't too. I just, again, you caught me there. But who is the observer? It's consciousness, pure consciousness.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. And it's a very fascinating subject, but it's to discuss it, especially through an astrological lens. It brings it alive even more so, I think, personally, for myself anyway. But trying to pigeonhole it as in the Virgo sense, what would you say is the key indicators for, or the key players for dream work?
What do you mean, the key players astrologically?
So yes, like astrologically, what would you say? Like you mentioned about working with the dream state, but how do the planets play into it? Do you think that each of them has their own role to play, or do you think, like, for example, I've noticed when I have nightmares, which I'm somebody who's always had, I've always had sort of night terrors and stuff. But I have got Saturn and Pluto square my Mercury, so that's probably part of it. But actually, whenever the moon transits my natal Pluto, I do wake up in a state of stress or some kind of anxiety through some kind of horrible dream where I'm out of control and, don't quite understand what's going on, dark stuff, the moon with Pluto. But obviously the moon, as you said, can indicate, like maybe the longevity of some kind of bug you might have or something. So we can look at the moving chart, the real moment of astrology, and kind of unpick it in that sense. But how do you think that astrology actually plays into dreaming? Does each planet have its own state of induction, or what are your thoughts on that?
I've got two responses to what you've said. I want to respond to the dynamics of your reaction to frightening experiences in the dream.
Yes.
What those usually indicate, your reaction in the dream, is a reflection, usually, again, it's very Jungian, but is a reflection of your waking state's capacity to deal with the unknown. So the more frightened you are, the less you know about it. And so therefore your reaction is a reflection of your resistance to the unknown, because it might eat you up. It might be a predator. And so the mind is wired into looking for predators, those things which are going to kill us and eat us, and those things that are going to take us and develop us, right? It's more than that, but you see, so dreams, so our reaction in dreams, especially when we come across monsters, those monsters might be a part of us which have yet to develop, and we haven't developed them, so they appear as monsters in order to wake us up. It's like that knock at the door. I often use that image, that there's a knock at the door in one dream, and then there's a bang at the door, and then somebody shoots a cannon at the door, and then it's getting to be such a thing, and you open the door and it's a mouse. You think, how could a mouse knock a door? That you see, and what we've got there is a representation of your fear as opposed to the actual thing. So dreams often reflect back to you your conscious relationship with the unconscious material. So it isn't that the dream is frightening you, it's something in you resisting looking into further depth.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
I'm trying to think now if my mind's ever created some kind of horrible, frightening monster to look at, or if it is literally just the suggestion of the the threat. And I'm thinking now that I can't really think I've ever created a horrible monster. I've seen things that you could probably see in real life that have been mishmashed into a dream, but not something beyond, like, you know, kind of a Gruffalo, for example. I'm reading the Gruffalo all the time at the moment, or, you know, something terrible like a seaweed monster or something. You know, don't see those things in dreams. You kind of see more the fear around what could be, like you're saying, the unknown.
Yes, but let me think by using an Ian McGilchrist example, right? Ian McGilchrist is the one in the last 20 years has done more research on the left and the right brains and the way that they perceive reality differently and so on. So let me just give you one of those. If you heard a noise downstairs, right? We've got a squirrel in our roof at the moment. So if you've got a noise downstairs, we think it's a squirrel, but we haven't seen it. So first, it could be a ghost, and your mind turns to The Exorcist, doesn't it? You know, the things in the roof. Right. Okay. So while you don't know consciously what that is, we have a mechanism in the unconscious for trying to work out what it is. And what it uses is your imagination.
Yes.
So it could be a burglar up there, it could be a squirrel, it could be a couple of mice, it could be something you see. So we imagine. So if you've got a noise downstairs in a room, right? And what happens is your heart's going. So if somebody's come in, we've been attacked, something's happening, you see, and you go in there, and it's just let's say somebody's cat has come through. The imaginal mind is there to kind of replace what we don't know. Do you see? It gives us an alternative of what could be happening, right? So one part of the mind, the imaginal, thinking, mythic stuff, starts to activate in place of an unknown content. But it could be fearful, could be not. So when we open the door, it's a mouse, or it's just a person, or it's your neighbor. And the only reason it got louder and louder and more frightening is we didn't open the door.
Yes. Yeah.
We imagined what was behind the door. And that's what I was just trying to say, that in dreams, they are often frightening because they represent some new level or dimension of awareness or consciousness that is going to upset your normal perception, because it's the territory of the unknown, if you like. And this is why a structured analysis of introducing yourself to your own unconscious needs to be slow, and it needs to be done in an ordered and logical manner. Otherwise, it can frighten you to death.
Yes. Yeah.
Like if somebody has an astral projection tonight and they haven't heard of it, they might think somebody's stolen their soul.
Yeah.
And that was an ancient idea that, you know, if people were on this, that a demon could come in and steal your soul off. So people need a different paradigm in their head to understand experience. And if they don't have one, this is where the value of education is important. If they don't have one, it's going to frighten them. So what that shadow is a reflection of that knowledge of what that is in you or external, whatever it is. It appears as a shadow, and it's a little bit frightening to your conscious ego. But Pluto does that until he gives you the substance, because you know the word Pluto means gold, or it means riches, what is underneath the earth, what we can't see, but becomes potential gold in our conscious life. So sorry, I was mixing a lot up there, but I wanted to pay attention to that. Now, when it comes to dreams, astrology denotes dreams as a ninth house issue, because it represents a kind of higher dimension or a higher intuition or something. And dreams were once thought to be communications from angels or messages for God. And you get dreams linked to prophecy and precognition and messages that you need to have. It's a moon-related issue when it comes to body, because the moon is to do with the night and the unconscious, or the subconscious. The subconscious is slightly below, you know, it's in the body. Body is, you know, we feel it through pain, but it functions and so on, but it can communicate to us. And then Mercury, of course, which is the psychopomp himself, who can, and Gemini, of course, whose main theme is to communicate from one level to another. You know, his myth is the Dioscuri, whose one brother is in heaven, is mortal, and one brother is immortal. And that myth is about trying to connect up the lost twin, the lost soul. And that's why Geminis are always going, well, what's that? And they're interested in linking, because they know that the ego, this front, is connected to a totally different level of consciousness behind it. Isabel Hickey called Gemini the sign of the artist, because the artist translates imaginal or dimensions into a language that other people can see or touch or understand. Sorry, that was a long trail there, but I wanted to address that fear issue that dreams bring. It's often a knocking at our door to say, you don't know something here, something is coming, and at first you're going to be frightened of it, but behind that is a deeper knowledge of yourself.
Yes, and it's interesting because it sort of implies that the dream state holds a type of intelligence that it sort of encourages us to step fearlessly into I don't know, authenticity, or you know, nudging us to evolve spiritually in some way, almost as though it's kind of it's a kind of nourishing and like I wouldn't say like a maternal force, but you know, there's a kind of like encouraging us to grow and to truly exist in our truth, which, you know, you can say, well, the dreams are a load of nonsense, but actually there is a lot of truth bubbling underneath it.
Of course, I can't remember who said live the dream on, but it's some philosopher, and I've always liked that. No, but Jung, again, a scientist, he had Saturn in Aquarius, so he was very objective about inner realities. I mean, he was Jung has Sun exactly square Neptune in Taurus. And you think, oh, that's a very strange connection. Neptune in the sign of Earth. And you know, Jung's mantra was, dreams are real. See, that's so Neptune in Taurus. Dreams are facts. Don't ignore them because they're the facts of the imagination. They are facts. They are representations. The purest representation of psychic contents that you can come across. Words are interpretations of those facts. So they're the purest form. So they're very real on the inner planes, and they are factual realities of psychic life.
And you know, this is slightly separate but along the same vein. I don't know if you've ever seen a TV show called The Sopranos at all, have you?
I didn't. I don't like seeing people get killed and garroted, and
there is stuff like that in there.
Yeah, I didn't like it. You know,
he's a mob boss, and he suffers from anxiety, which he didn't realize it was anxiety at first. He thought he had a heart problem or something. And after all the tests and everything, he ends up getting sent to a therapist. So he has a psychotherapist or a psychologist. And he picks her because she's Italian, and she's brilliant in it. It's the one from Goodfellas. But she's he has these really, really interesting interactions with her as a you know, like a client therapist dynamic, which is very difficult because he's, you know, used to being in charge, and then he's got this woman who is psychoanalyzing him and this kind of thing. But you know, one of the interesting things in that series is that they like to play with the dream state, and a lot of the time in this it would take you into dreams. It was very psychological, so it, you know, you get to see inside the mind of, you know, this is all very fictional, but like inside the mind of a mob boss and what he dreams of. And there's this one series in particular, which this contains a spoiler alert if anyone's planning to watch The Sopranos, so, you know, maybe just pause skip ahead for a minute. But he's having these like repetitive dreams that he's with his friend, his a colleague who is always in his dream, but he keeps on giving little details away about himself. And then they end up on a pier, and the guy's there, and like everybody's looking at him, and there's something really disconcerting about it all. And in real life, it transpires eventually that the guy is working, he's wearing a wire, he's been intercepted by the CIA, and he's spying on all of them. But the mob boss, it implies there has to be a sort of psychic element about being somebody in that position of power, because they have to be in tune with things that are not being said. And the way that it was made, and I agree, some of it's very, very gory and unnecessary and horrible, but there's elements of the show that are just amazing. And it dared to venture into the psychological realms of kind of a whole area of filmmaking, cinema that's never ever gone there before.
Apart from little bits, I know the thing, but yes, it was a wonderful magic of cinema or film. You can do that. You can go off into fantasy, and then it used to have a fade. Do you remember in those old 50s where you'd have a fade? It would go, and then there was a kind of memoir of what it was like back home, and then it would fade, and then it would come forward. But they've advanced that idea to go in or out it. Something's just come back about that when you triggered it. Jung also discovered that this process of things in you or coming through you are in a process of development. Images and things are all energetic. Images come from somewhere, but usually energetic forces, which are then imaged through the unconscious. We deal in images and words and sensations and feelings. That's the human condition. What they are, we don't quite know the source, but how they're experienced is in images. And he reckoned they were trying to do something. And they were trying to evolve. In other words, there is a current from past to future, a teleology. They're going somewhere. And Jung called that the process of individuation, that there is a process in each individual which is trying to complete their task or complete their incarnation or complete their, as much as they can, the processes of achieving actualization of their potential, as Maslow called it. Self-actualization. So that it's not just a random series of things, because what Jung discovered was that there's often a dream series when you're working on your mother complex or working on something. A whole series of sometimes 20, 30, 40 dreams would be about your work doing it, and it's trying to evolve different bits of it. So there is a futuristic teleology to it, and how we can apply that to astrology is that in the end, that Pluto-Mercury transit of yours has a teleology. It has an end result. It has a lysis. There's an outcome somewhere. So it's as if the future is drawing us towards it. See, and that's called a cause, or a final cause of Aristotle. It's drawing us towards it, and it's an evolutionary current. And it would mean that you're going to, that whatever the limitations of your awareness and education, all those Mercury things, those are going to go and transform. And I wouldn't be surprised if, and I didn't mean to be rude about your Gemini connections, but a Gemini tends to have a lot of span, right? So, but it goes that way.
Yes.
But what it requires is to join the immortal twin, the twin underneath or a higher, up with the surface level. So the all of what is learned here is connected to a depth of evolution. That's the ultimate, I would say, interpretation of a Pluto-Mercury. And if you carry on these conversations and you carry on your stuff and you continue to be an astrologer and you work with this material with people, that's what you're doing. I think you're going to be doing a lot more of it.
Yes, I do too. I haven't mentioned it to you, but actually I'm studying hypnotherapy now. So that's you know, I'm really early in my studies because I'm really taking it slowly. It's self-directed, but I'm on that path now. I've been pulled to it. It's something that I've been interested in, but I have been getting messages left, right, and center to do it, not just from within myself or from my immediate external environment, but actually people have come and told me things that I need to do it, basically. So yeah, that's
wonderful. Well,
this, I think.
it's a matter. We're back to Freud again, and he started as a hypnotherapist.
Oh, really?
Oh yes, he wanted to help people through the hypnotherapy method. It was called the pressure method, and he would pressurize their thumb and start asking them questions, and this would anyway. And he gave up hypnotherapy because he wanted things to be a bit more free. He just wanted people just to kind of get in a liminal state, and they would lie down, and he would take himself out of the picture and allow them to go into this liminal free association state, which is hypnopompic, I think, where when you're just kind of not waking, not awake, not dreaming, but just allowing things to arise, an alpha state. And but hypnotherapy is slightly different in that you're working with liminal states of lowered consciousness and trust.
Yes.
He's the brother of Thanatos, actually. Hypnos is the twin of Thanatos. Thanatos is death and Hypnos is sleep.
Interesting.
And so they're connected. In sleep, you've kind of died to yourself, died to the awareness of your body and the physical limitations, and you're in an amorphous, outside of time space realities, but in it, it's very difficult to describe. Very Neptunian place.
Yes. And I was going to say, it's you know, we are having this conversation as the moon. I don't know if he's in there yet or if it's going to be, has it gone into Pisces? It's in Pisces now. And with Saturn, so a few minutes away from Saturn at 0 degrees.
Isn't that funny? I started to talk about amorphous, hypnotic, liminal states, and before there was a bit of the science, the moon in Aquarius, a little bit of the technicalities from Jung and his Aquarius ascendant, and now we've moved into this liminal is a good phrase for it.
Yes, and as I'm aware that the time is ticking, we've got a little bit longer if we want to talk, if there's anything we haven't covered that you wanted to, but yes, I'm aware that we don't have as much time left now. So
well, what I propose something. I think this is a good start, but we did do about half an hour on the different levels of dream states rather than dream itself. So it might be a good idea, but it will be more work on you, is to get a couple of dreams, or maybe 5 or 6 or 7 dreams from your viewers.
Yes.
And then next time, or your dreams. I introduce my dreams because I don't like to tell dreams of my clients, because I think they're very private. I don't mind giving out mine. But it might be a good idea that we write those down, not in 3 sheets of A3 to go through, but a précis of certain dreams, and we could have a look at those next time, but even try to interpret them and use them not just to help the person, but as a way of showing how to work on them, rather than the technicalities of working on dreams as a therapist. We could actually do it.
I think this could be a bit of a series for us, couldn't it? Just in the same way that we work through some of our dream lessons in a series of lessons, maybe this can be a waking dream series where we can show actually how to work with dreams with astrology and in the waking state. And I just want to point out that actually it's been incredibly difficult for us to record this show because in fact, before even this podcast existed, there was another podcast I used to have with my friend Shana, in the US, and we had you as you were going to come on as a guest to
Yeah.
talk about that, and that was years and years ago.
Yeah.
It must have been 2018, I think.
Yes.
And then you know, it didn't go ahead because a lot of horrible life stuff was going on. And so we put a pause on it, and then we decided we didn't have time for the podcast, and that's when I went into doing this myself. But even just recently, we were supposed to record this like maybe a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And I've had so many issues, like technical issues. So it's almost like the time had to be perfect for this to be discussed and for us to do this work. So I really appreciate that you've been so patient about this.
All right. Yes, yeah, no, that's all right. But I feel, you know, when it's like astrology, you start talking about the planets and you unfold them, you know, it is a lifetime's work.
Yes.
And so any books on dreams are ways in, and dream dictionaries give you just a way in. But I would just like to just draw attention to an important fact about dreams, or an important thing that I've seen is it's always good to talk over dreams with someone.
Yes.
Because when you're reflecting on your own, it's very difficult. You are it's difficult. So that's it. And also dreams in general, they could be working on it at the same time, is that they can be both subjective and objective. Now, what by that I mean to say that if I dream of somebody that I know, they turn up in a dream, right? It could be, and which is where therapy helps, it could be something to do with what you're thinking about them, or something you associate with them. It's your relationship with them, but it has something essentially to do with you. And you can pick around and you get your personal context. You might have had an argument with them 8 months ago, and it might be reappearing. Or some material that's hit off that needs analyzing and being made conscious. That's called the subjective process of dream interpretation. But as you and I know, sometimes it refers to actually real people. Sometimes the dream is for other people. And I have a habit now, and I was in a dream group for a year with a famous psychotherapist called Anthony Lunt, and we might talk about that another time, because he held a dream group and we all dreamt of each other, and he used those dreams of each other, you know, like 6 unconsciousnesses on you if you turned up in several dreams, you see. So he recreated a kind of dream group, which I would like to do at some point, start that going, because it's not just my conscious mind or another conscious mind. It's 6 unconsciousnesses, and you have a group unconscious that if you start to stimulate through dream incubation, right, you can start to incubate dreams and they can come up. Then that's talking about dreams at an objective level. In other words, something you're picking up information about someone. So I always have a rule now that if I dream of someone, I generally contact them in real life.
I'm exactly the same. I do the exact same thing. Because
you never know when it's about them, when it's about you, because as you know, it's this space-time reality business. It permeates the past. It can see into the future, certain dynamics. Prognosticatory dreams are very fascinating, and you may be in telepathic contact with a friend or a sister or a brother, and they may be influencing you. So it's always good to, I think, have an open mind. Is it, you know, Gestalt therapy just says every part of the dream is you. Well, I think that's too narrow. It's good to work like that. You can gain from it, but it might be to do with someone else as well. So I just wanted to finish on that. And maybe if we want to examine how to work with dreams and what they mean, then we might do some personal examples with that and demonstrate rather than theorize.
Yes. I think that would be really good, and that would be something that we could do with my patrons.
Yeah, Yeah.
So I've got a Patreon page, and it really is very, very affordable. It's, I think, about the price of a cup of coffee each month, and it means that you can write to me, talk to me. I put all sorts of interesting podcasts and videos up there. So yeah, the patrons get perks, you see. So I think that would be a really nice perk for them. And I was just going to also just touch on the fact that you've got a book called From Symbol to Substance.
Yeah.
And you're working on the horary
process.
Remind me of the title. The horary process. Yes. So
It's
is
finished.
Whereabouts is that? And it's finished. Congratulations.
Well, it's no. Let me correct that. It's finished from my end.
Yes.
It's
so you're doing the tweaks now.
I brought it to birth, and it nearly did my brain in. And
yeah.
Anyway, it all came out, and it's finished now, and it's off at the publishers, and Brilliant. It's just awaiting editing. And we've come up with a fantastic idea, is that Frank Clifford, who is the head of the London School of Astrology, he's going to edit it, but he's also going to do a little commentary on it. So in other words, he's going to go through my text, and if he thinks I haven't explained it well, or he can explain it slightly differently, he's going to come in and make a comment on it with some examples. So in that way, it becomes very Geminian. I have a Gemini MC, he has a Gemini ascendant, and it becomes a collaboration. So it is my work, but it's also going to be his. So in that sense, because horary can become so complicated, it's better if we have a dialogue between two astrologers to articulate and clarify things that I might not have got right on my own. So it's in his court, and we're going to be collaborating on that probably in 2 or 3 months when he, because there's a lot to do. He gets about 200 emails a day. That would just drive my mind down the nearest toilet flush.
Speaking of Pluto. Yes, so I just recently had somebody get in touch with me from the previous recording that we did, the previous show that we did, which was really interesting, and I'll link it, asking to have a reading with you. And that is your preferred method for people to get in touch right now, is to contact me to pass your details
if you wouldn't mind. Yes, if it gets overburdened for you, I'll have to pay you for your work. But
I'll be your
I have
assistant.
contacted that other lady, and so on. But I generally don't like to be contacted through email. My phone, WhatsApp is much better. So by all means, give that out if people want to contact me further for either things that I do. I'm a psychotherapist and an astrologer, of course.
Yes. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, it's been really fun today, Richard. I've really enjoyed it, and
hasn't it gone quick?
I wanted to talk for longer, but I just literally can't. But the planets have aligned for us today. They finally made it possible. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. See you soon.